Okay, well, we have been watching a very lengthy Q&A session with the President of the United States and the new Prime Minister from Canada, Mark Carney, talking about a lot of issues. But I do maybe want to start where that left off, because despite the fact that the two men and, frankly, the two governments and countries, particularly Canada, have been very rhetorically aggressive towards one another, particularly with regard to this trade war that is going on. At the beginning, it was extremely cordial, really almost throughout the entire thing. Then at the end, you did see and hear President Trump start to get and give more jabs, talking about the fact that the United States doesn't need Canadian goods, doesn't need to have cars from Canada. And if you can see right there, the body language from and by the Canadian Prime Minister, he was not happy. And then the president ended the session, and now they're going to go behind closed doors, and we can only imagine how that conversation is going to go. I want to bring in CNN's Kevin Liptak and Paula Newton. They are both at the White House today. And Paula, I do want to start with you, because if I am in Canada watching my new prime minister, who got elected largely because he said, President Trump, back off, hear him say not once but twice, we're not going to be the 51st state. I can tell you right now that the Canadians spoke in this election, and it's not going to happen. I'm sure they will be pleased by that, maybe less pleased by the lecture on economics that we just heard from President Trump at the end of that session.
Listen, Dana, you hit it right on the head there. The issue is here in terms of tone. Look, this was completely different, not just from what President Trump had been saying really for months, but also from the election campaign of Mark Carney. And he had a very strident campaign and had harsh words for the president. They sat there in the Oval Office, couldn't be more cordial, right? What's that issue now? Substance. And in terms of substance, these two countries remain very far apart. Just fact-checking a couple of things. In terms of the ripping off of Canada, it is true Canada gets a lot from the relationship with the United States. But the Prime Minister, Carney, tried to interject there and say, point blank, Canada is the largest purchaser of American goods, period. Full stop. And that's why not too far from here on Capitol Hill, Dana, which you know all too well, there have been both Democratic and Republican politicians saying that to the White House loud and clear. Why? Because in severing that trade relationship with the United States, it will hurt both Democratic and Republican states. That's point number one. I think it is a message loud and clear to any other nation trying to do negotiations here at this White House that this president is sticking to what he thinks about these trade deals. He said, OK, sure, we've got this trade deal with Canada and Mexico. We may renegotiate it. We may abandon the trade deal. He is leaving everything on the table. And from that point of view, when you see Mark Carney there, really trying to say what he could with the body language, right? Basically saying that Donald Trump owes him in terms of the election. He got him elected, and he turned apparently and said, oh, yeah, right. Listen, that is what we've been hearing from the Prime Minister's office. Make no mistake, Dana. Prime Minister Carney does respect this president. And when he says he's transformational, he means it. That does not mean there will not be collateral damage in both Canada and the United States if that's the way this relationship goes forward. Look, the expectations weren't very high in this meeting, I can tell you, from Canadian officials. So far, so okay from the Oval Office. I'm sure behind closed doors things will get better. But again, no one should be under illusions here. This is going to be a very long negotiations, and both Americans themselves and American businesses should not be shocked about what happens next.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kevin, let me turn to you, and I just want to put a finer point on what Paula was saying when it comes to one of the basic fact checks about the economic and trade relationship between the U.S. and Canada. First and foremost, even this year alone, I'm told that the U.S. exports to Canada made up 17% of U.S. exports. But what you're looking at there, that's 2024. These are U.S. exports to Canada. So it's the Canadians buying American goods and services, $349.4 billion. It is the highest except for the EU, which is not on this. So it is a fact that the United States benefits greatly from Canada buying the U.S. goods. Kevin.
Right. And that's part of why it's so striking to hear the language that the president uses when he's talking about Canada. As you mentioned before, this meeting started relatively cordially. And in fact, when someone asked the president whether they would discuss this idea of Canada becoming the 51st American state, he tried to downplay it, saying that it wouldn't be a part of the conversation. And then he proceeded to talk at length about why he thinks it would be advantageous for Canada to become a part of the United States. And it was in a lot of ways hard for Carney to get a word in edgewise there. And you did note his body language. I was noting particularly when the president was going after, he didn't name her, but Chrystia Freeland, the former finance minister, saying that she was a terrible negotiator, talking about this experience negotiating the USMCA. He kind of had a pained look on his face. If I